I think it's now time to start with our next panel, our plenary session, renewed efforts to close the gender gap. And I'd like to invite our panelists to please make their way up on stage now to take their seats. Dr. Kankasa Mabula, the Deputy Governor, Bank of Zambia. Julia Braun-Miller, Women, Business and the Law. Nathan Naidu, Director Policy and Advocacy, GSMA. Helen Warby, the Women's Economic Imperative, T20 Argentina Welsh Government. And we also have our theme setter, Dr. Nabe, the Governor of the Central Bank of Guinea, joining us on stage as part of the panel. And our moderator, ladies and gentlemen, Inez Murray, the Chief Executive Officer, Global Banking Alliance for Women. This is the renewed efforts to close the gender gap plenary session. Following this, we'll have the AFI Partnership Champion Special Recognition and our final plenary session following that, ladies and gentlemen. So once again, can we please give our panelists, our theme setter and our moderator a round of applause.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome my gentleman to the right, Dr. Luwensi Nabe, Governor, Bank of Guinea, to make the opening remarks. He's going to speak in French, so please put on your headphones. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moderator. I would like to pay enough attention to the participants, knowing that I would like to thank for this possibility to participate at this forum. Once again, thank you very much, Ms. Moderator, and I would like to use this possibility to present once again my congratulations and my gratitude to the Russian authorities, to the Russian Central Bank, to the AFI for the quality of their welcome and the quality of their facilities which have been given to my disposition and also for my delegation during our arrival to Sochi. And naturally, I would also like to express my gratitude to all the participants of the panel, to the President for such rich exchanges we've had. Ladies and gentlemen, this plenary session, during this session we'll talk about the deficit in the access for men and women to the financial services. Usually it has been unanimously recognized that the access of women to financial services of good quality and accessible is a key factor for the gender gap and for women's empowerment, and is one of the conditions of the economic growth condition. And this makes an integral part of the sustainable growth development of the UN. And taking this into consideration, women are in general excluded from the formal official system, excluded from a lot of economic activities. And this has been constituted by our alliance, and after the 2016 forum in Fiji. We approved an action plan to promote financial inclusion for women and to go towards gender equality. And this action plan, thanks to it, the AFI network has adopted a very important goal to reduce the gender gap in every member country up to 2020, before 2020. Before the adoption of this plan, Fiji and after this adoption of Fiji plan, 28 members of the alliance have adopted the engagement according to the My Declaration. Ladies and gentlemen, today it has been recognized that women are very good payers in the financial system. It's also known that credits given to women go to the well-being of women themselves, to their children, and also to their husbands. It has been established that they are in the center of the family activity, and they, of course, there are also barriers to their access to financing. Among these barriers, there are also the question of guarantees of certain legal affairs to make possible for the women to have access to the financial documents. There are social presenters that they manage the family's affairs, and there are also things connected to illiteracy, which is high in many countries, and especially illiteracy among women. This is even more paradoxical that the discussions on development financing has been enlarged during these last years. If the financing of the development has known a significant progress, financing of the women's activity is unfortunately blocked by what we can call micro scale. That is why we would like to take into consideration what has been said, but was said by Ms. Duma when she was the representative of the African Union during the representation of the Saudi Arabia and the financial question. She said that we hear micro something, micro other thing, but we can hear nothing about women. And we have to talk, we should think big and to stop thinking only about micro. We should consider them, the women, as true entrepreneurs as men are. And that is extremely important for the economic and social development, for the nations, for our peoples, because we are talking about persons which constitute about half of humanity. I've been talking about illiteracy, which can be an extremely important barrier, including in the field which is today considered as the one which can be an accelerator of the financial inclusion. I mean the digital financial services. I have been following, yesterday I followed the presentation of the Russian vice governor of the Central Bank of Russia, vice governor, and she was talking about the rate of use of smartphone in different world's region, and Africa's rate of penetration was 40%. They use smartphones, but the mobile phone in Africa, the use of is extremely important. In Guinea, in my country, this rate is 100%. That doesn't mean that every person in Guinea has a mobile phone, because there are some people that can have two phones at the same time. And it's true that mobile phone categories are different, and today's the territorial coverage is much bigger with the first generation phones, and the smartphone has progressively entered into the market, but the penetration is limited by illiteracy, because we need to use different functions, and to do this you need firstly to be able to read and to count, and many cannot do this, especially in regards to women. So financial services providers should take into account this point, and the government and the regulators, such as central banks, international organizations, the organizations should help women to resolve this question and to bring new dynamics to the acceleration of the financial inclusion via smartphones and via financial services, digital financial services. Obviously, a lot of efforts has been made. In our country, we have known great success thanks to digital services, but in the field of the use of mobile phones in rural areas among feminine population, the significant progress has been registered in Nigeria, in Niger, in Kenya, in Niger also. In India, that we can consider a training and help which must be given to the different stakeholders, by the government, by financial service providers, by international organizations, by different other organizations, to help women in these efforts, which need to continue to reach the goal we have set for ourselves. Of course, there are different initiatives which have been developed in every country in order to try to move forward.
I'd just cite one, which is implemented in Guinea at the initiative of the government and under the supervision of the central bank, and this is creation of the mutual institutions by African women, directed and managed by women, and extending the credit to exclusively women. Since 2014 launch of the initiative, I should say that the results are extremely encouraging, and the message of this pilot project is already visible. The credits are reimbursed in full, and the rate of reimbursement of those credits is close to 100%. It's true that the government unfailably support the project, but the institution in question, which is supported by the government, extends credit line to this company, which in turn finances women. But I should mention that this guarantee extended by the government has never been solicited because the credits are repaid in full. Well, we don't have much time. I try to get very, very briefly. The women empowerment is a key condition for the sustainable development. The economic empowerment of women is capable to accelerate the inclusion of women into financial and economic life. The financial inclusion is the goal, but at the same time it is a tool to achieve a better access for an extremely large strata of the population, to get them into a better position in the economic domain. And this activity should be supported by higher penetration of women into all facets of the economic and social life. Thank you so much. Merci votre.
I think very eloquently some of the barriers and some of the solutions to integrating women into the system, particularly low income, very low income, and often illiterate segments of the population. And so with that framing, we're going to turn the mic over to our panel, and we're going to speak from a varied perspective. We, of course, to my immediate left have Dr. Takia Kansasa Mabula, who's a gender champion in Zambia and also in AFI, and is chair of the AFI Gender and Women Financial Inclusion Committee, which has really made tremendous progress in the last couple of years, certainly since the Maya Declaration and then the Denaru Action Plan. So we're going to get Takia's perspective, then moving on to Julia, who comes from Women, Business and the Law, which is a growing force in understanding the legal barriers to women globally, and really is a tremendous resource for all of us. Then moving on to Nathan Naidu, who's Director of Policy and Advocacy from GSMA, and they've, of course, very powerful and important organization, and he's going to share some of his insights on the barriers and the opportunities to digital financial services for women. And then, last but not least, Ms. Helen Walby, who represents the Women's Economic Imperative in the UK and is the rep to the T20 in Argentina, and we're going to get an update on the policy recommendations of the W20 to the G20 later this year in Argentina. So first, over to Dr. Takia. Since you're the chair of the committee, I'm going to ask you what is the update since the last GPF last year, so we all get on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ines. I would also like to just thank our hosts, the Russian Central Bank, for hosting us at the 2018 GPF Forum. We're very well received and have greatly enjoyed the facilities. I would also like to thank AFI for once again convening the Global Policy Forum, and also to congratulate AFI for 10 years of very amazing existence. Yes, indeed, a lot has happened since the last GPF in terms of gender and women's financial inclusion. And particularly when you look at the fact that gender only became a topic really in 2015 with the meeting in Yamoussoukro. although the first question was asked in Trinidad and Tobago in 2014, which was whether there was any role on the issue of gender for central banks. With the adoption of the General Action Plan in 2016, that was really the tipping point, and a lot of work has been done with regards to advancing the issue of women's financial inclusion. Of course, one of the first steps that we have taken with the adoption of the General Action Plan is to make a commitment as individual AFI members to have the gender gap in our jurisdictions by 2021. And in this regard, there were several activities that were undertaken in the past year, including training for the collection of sex disaggregated data. We also had training to our communication officers in the various member institutions on how to communicate the issue of women's financial inclusion. We also had training on integrating gender in national financial inclusion strategies. We have also continued with our collaborations, and one particular one that I would like to mention is the one with the Women's World Banking, which is going to undertake training in gender diversity. An MOU has been signed with AFI to undertake training. And we are also participating as the co-chair of the W20 together with the Global Banking Alliance. So a lot of work continues to be done with regards to activities to advance women's financial inclusion. And I will be remiss if I do not mention that just on Wednesday, the AGM that was held here in Sochi, the articles of association of AFI were amended to include diversity at the level of the board as well as in other AFI organs.
Excellent, Tukia. So I suppose the question is, we have a 9% gap still that seems quite persistent, and indeed the 34% or 32% just mentioned in the MSME panel just before lunch on access to credit. And I suppose a big question I would have for you would be, what are your main hypotheses as to the nature of this gap? Because my next panelists are going to be exploring some of the underlying drivers. So what's your sense?
Well, actually, the gender gap, when we first received the Global Findex report, it was very, very disappointing to see that the gender gap was sticky. I've seen people using the word stable. I don't think it's an appropriate word. I think the appropriate word may be persistent at 9% for emerging and developing countries. But we must acknowledge the fact that there has been progress that has been achieved. Between 2014 and 2017, an additional 250 million women were able to get bank accounts. And also this figure does mask the differences between the different countries. If you take a country like India, there's been tremendous progress, and that has been ascribed to digital financial services. And if you take a country like Russia, they've actually got an inverse gender gap. There's more women that hold accounts than men. So some progress has been made. But we also recognize that there are a lot of countries whose gender gap has increased. And we need to get a better understanding of exactly what is going on, and particularly because it continues to grow in a parallel. Although there's been an increase in accounts, there's been this parallel movement also in the gender gap, which has remained the same. So we need to interrogate it and be able to address it from the individual countries. What are the needs of each individual country? And I think from the discussions that we've had here in Sochi, it's also very clear that we need a multi-pronged approach. And I was glad to hear as the governor of Guinea presented, setting the scene, that we really do need to approach this from different directions, different stakeholders, governments, regulatory authorities, central banks, the private sector. Everyone has a role to play in this. And I don't think that it's correct to think that AFI is going to be able to achieve this on its own. We need to work with various stakeholders, partners. We need to be finding even additional stakeholders that can be influenced in taking action to address this gap.
Thanks, Takia. So over to Julia now for the your analysis. So Women, Business and the Law looks at the underlying legal framework that when there are discriminatory laws on the books that inhibit women's capacity to participate in the economy. And it's a really interesting analysis, and this year you produced an analysis looking at financial inclusion in particular. So if you could walk us through, albeit briefly, what are the underlying barriers that you see in the legal frameworks and the laws that need to be tackled?
Yeah, thank you for giving me the chance to explore this question with you. The question really being, why is there this sticky, not stable, sticky gender gap in women's financial inclusion? And we've heard, and I'm really grateful for the comments from the governor, we've heard women are very reliable business partners. They're trustworthy, they pay back their loans. So it's not that we can say, you know, women don't know how to handle their money. So why is there a sticky gender gap? What are underlying reasons that maybe we have forgotten to look at? This is exactly what we do at the World Bank, at Women, Business and the Law. We look at the reasons that are in the legal framework. So we analyze the legal framework in 189 economies and see where there are gender differences in the law. And we find that there are many gender differences, that gender restrictions where the law is unequal for men and for women. And what do I mean by this? What is a gender restrictive law? I want to walk you through 3 areas of law where we see these restrictions to make it a bit clearer. So the first area is very basic level restrictions on women's legal capacity or freedom of movement. For example, we see that in several economies, a woman needs her husband's permission to open a bank account, or also she needs to prove additional documentation when she wants to get an ID card. And of course, these are barriers to open a bank account. I want to give you a very concrete example from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where until last year, until 2016, a woman needed written permission, literally a sheet of paper with her husband signing, "My wife may open a bank account." And similarly, we see there are laws where it's the husband who decides on the marital home, who decides where to live, who decides whether a woman can leave the house. And so, of course, if a woman is restricted in such basic rights, it also has an impact on her financial inclusion, on just her going to the bank and deciding whether or not to open an account. The second area is women's property rights. And we know that women's access to property is constrained throughout her life. That starts with unequal inheritance laws and then carries on through marriage, where because of domestic responsibilities or because of the marital property regime, a woman may also be limited in accumulating property, which then of course has impact on her access to collateral that she can pledge when applying for a loan. And according to our research, now going back to stage 1, inheritance, we have found it in 39 economies worldwide. That's a bunch, that's almost 40 countries. The law prevents daughters from inheriting in the same way as the son. So a woman just doesn't get as much money as the son. And then when we correlate that with Findex data, we see that gender gap in mortgage ownership is higher in these economies. I want to give another example to see how this is practically relevant. Why is changing the law relevant for women's financial inclusion? A study in India has actually found that after the inheritance law was reformed and it was made equal for women and for men, that women's education improved. And then the second generation effect was even larger, and there was an impact on financial inclusion. Women who had benefited from this reform of the law had a bigger bank account ownership compared to other women. And the third area of law that I think is very important is affirmative laws. So now moving away from just removing restrictions, removing barriers, to affirmative action, such as non-discrimination acts. We want to take active measures to protect women from being discriminated against taking loans just because of their gender. And such a provision can be in a Consumer Protection Act, for example. And we have seen that countries that have enacted such non-discrimination provisions based on gender also have a smaller financial inclusion gap compared to other countries.
Thanks, Julia. It's very eye-opening to understand the underlying issues. And I wonder, because we have an audience of regulators, you know, how should a regulator behave, and what should they do when some of these laws are kind of beyond their remit? So what kind of role can they play to influence?
Yeah, I'm also really encouraged to see that there's so many regulators who are keen on developing national financial inclusion strategies, and that's one of the core tasks that AFI has subscribed to. So when we design such a national inclusion strategy, why don't we look at underlying legal barriers for women? And we're so used to, talking about financial regulations and maybe the labor law, but we don't necessarily look at the family law. We don't necessarily look at the legal framework in its entirety to see where there are differences for women. And I would really hope that as a next step, when designing a financial inclusion strategy, we look at the laws in general that are important for finance, but then we also take that extra step and we look at the laws that are important for women, and we make it a priority to reform them so that women can be financially included on all levels.
Thanks, Juliet. Okay, over to Nathan, and we know from Findex that a lot of the uptake in accounts is through digital, and that of course includes women. We still have a gender gap in terms of access to mobile phones and so on. I was wondering if you could give us your sense, GSMA's sense of, what are the most significant barriers that women face in accessing digital?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the first thing I would say about it is that it's a very hard question to answer because we don't have quality data. And I really applaud the collective effort that's happening now to try to deal with that. But often what is getting lost in the debate is the difference between simple quantity of data and quality data. And if you look, at the GSMA, we receive data from mobile operators around the world. And what we see is that the data that they hold on the gender composition of their customer base is not accurate for the simple reason that in many cases, men are registering for accounts on behalf of women. And so we must solve the underlying issue of the quality of the data to really be able to make smart commercial and public policy decisions. And how do we do that? It's through the spread of greater access to identity. It's through reform of KYC regulations so that you can have, so that women face fewer barriers to actually accessing an account. And it's through the sponsoring of large-scale demand-side studies on the use of financial services. So that's something that it's very difficult for a single private sector organization to go out and sponsor a nationwide study, but is an important role that governments can play in actually addressing, again, the underlying quality of the data. That said, there are some obvious lessons that we've learned, and I was very pleased to hear the governor mention the important role of mobile technology in actually reaching women and extending the financial inclusion of women. What we've seen in a study that we did recently is that where women own a mobile device, we did this study in Cote d'Ivoire and in Mali, they actually were equally likely to register for a mobile money account and then to move along the customer journey. That is, to go from being a registered customer to being someone who actually uses the service. Now, of course, the fundamental barrier, again, is access to mobile devices, and that's another important thing that needs to be considered, I think, in the context of AFI. It raises significant questions about how do you, as an organization composed largely of financial services regulators, affect the penetration of mobile devices in markets so that you can advance the financial inclusion of women. And then equally, when it comes to actually reaching women, there are a lot of lessons that we're learning on distribution. So at the GSMA, I focus on mobile money, which is a specific kind of financial service that relies on distribution networks. And what we're seeing is a lot of innovation by providers to actually better access potential women customers. So some of the things that are happening, the hiring of more women agents. So we see that women are more likely to interact with a woman agent than a man agent, and there are many reasons for that. It can be issues of what's culturally appropriate or personal security. And so providers are increasingly realizing that they can register more women if they are employing more women to actually do the registration process. Equally, we've seen in some countries that women are moving in either a smaller or a different geographic remit than men. And so the use of roving agents, agents that are not sort of in a fixed position, can also help to ensure that women are actually getting registered for accounts. Lastly, I would just maybe insert a bit of a positive note. I know there's a lot of gloom around the Findex results, and rightfully so. But if you read the Findex report itself, there's actually a very interesting stat buried underneath the headline statistic about the persistent gender gap. And that is that in 4 out of 6 countries that the World Bank looked at, where people, they looked at people who have only a mobile money account. That is, they don't have another type of formal account. And in 4 out of those 6 countries, they found that there was actually no gender gap in ownership of mobile money accounts. Now that is quite a significant statistic, something that bears additional research, but I should say that the research that we're doing out of the GSMA seems to substantiate the idea that mobile money is one of the best ways for women to become financially included for the very reasons that I mentioned. It works through mobile devices, and distribution can allow for a lot of innovation that gives women access to financial services.
Great, Nathan. And I'm wondering on the data question, I believe you have some pilot initiative to try and get sex disaggregated data from your members?
Absolutely. So whereas that demand side data cannot be replaced, it's essential, and we need to make the investments in identity, regulatory reform, and large-scale studies, there are things that providers can do, in particular through machine learning, to try to make better estimates of the gender composition of their customer base. And so at the GSMA, what we've been trying to do through something called the Connected Women Commitment Initiative is to actually devise tools that can help providers to figure this out. And it's a rough estimate, it's not perfect, but through machine learning you can make judgments based on certain behavioral characteristics in the data of whether a customer is a man or a woman, and then you can start to tailor your products to that individual based on that estimate.
Yes, please.
Data is actually one of the areas that AFI has identified as being a barrier to greater participation of women. And particularly also we saw when we're encouraging countries to put forward Maya Declaration commitments on women's financial inclusion, a lot of countries did advance the issue of lack of data as a constraint to being able to make firm commitments. So in this regard, AFI is actually doing something about the issue of data. There are 2 pilot projects going on right now, Zambia and Egypt, trying to create frameworks for the collection of gender disaggregated data. So I just wanted to mention that something tangible is being done about trying to address the issue of data. Of course, historical data is something else, but going forward, we should be in a better situation.
Thanks, Chikia. And that's part of the Women's Financial Inclusion Data Partnership, of which AFI is involved, and hopefully GSMA may consider getting involved. Over to Helen for a kind of a broader perspective of, you know, the G20. We had a panel this morning on the G20 and financial inclusion. And, you know, AFI and the GBA have been co-chairs this year of their financial inclusion working group for the W20, which is the Women 20. And Helen is a representative of the T20, which is the think tank 20.
Yeah.
And the W20 and the T20 have the same set of recommendations for women's financial inclusion. So I was wondering, Helen, if you could give a very quick overview of those recommendations for Argentina.
No problem. The Argentina summit will be taking place in 2 weeks' time, and many of the ideas that have been discussed here in the last 2 days are recommendations that have come out from the T20 as well and from the W20. So we have many, many similarities, but we also have some key issues that impact on women much more significantly than they do on men. So the T20, for those people that aren't au fait with the difference between the W20 and the T20, the W20 is transnational, it was founded in 2015, and it has obviously both AFI and the Global Banking Alliance as the co-chairs. The T20 is much more focused on research-based and think tank policy advice, and really aims to coordinate some of the G20 efforts. And our particular think tank is one of 10. The Gender Inclusion Think Tank is the fourth one. And the aim of that think tank is around reducing the gender labour market gap. It's also looking at fostering women's economic empowerment rights and promoting gender equality. There are some key recommendations that have come out of that. They align quite nicely with the recommendations that have come out of the W20 as well. And the core one of those is what we've been talking about for days, which is data. The issue around sex disaggregated data is persistent, and it's great to hear that AFI are now making some moves on this. But we really need to be quite bold in dealing with this issue, because until we have the necessary data, we are not going to have a good enough evidence base to be able to really know where we can seize opportunities and where we have got blind spots. We also found that when financial services were available, there was still a lack of uptake with women. There was a lack of engagement, and so there is an opportunity around building financial capability and usage so that we can educate people on the range of services that are available, to encourage people on what they can use. When I was coming back in the coach last night, I was talking to Smita, and we were discussing how mobile phones are advertised. And a really simple example we were talking about was mobile phones are frequently advertised as entertainment devices. Lots of the advertisements focus on men using them, and lots of women don't realize the additional services that they can have around educating their children, accessing healthcare, and the financial inclusion element. So we have an opportunity around educating people on the wider range of services that they can get through mobile devices. Linked to that, there is a word of warning, because we've been talking about ensuring that these are all available for women. But in certain communities, we have to challenge underlying social norms, because if we just make these available, but we don't challenge the underlying norms, then that can really impact the effectiveness of them. And it can also lead to negative consequences, such as intimate partner violence. So what we also need to do is, as well as ensuring that women have the knowledge to use them, we need to be working with men, and we need to be working with male champions who can support women's access to greater financial inclusion and really champion that. So the role of allies becomes absolutely critical. When we were looking at the issue around the unbanked women, we found that lack of formal ID was a persistent problem. That is also one of the recommendations, ensuring that everybody has access to digital ID with the necessary data protection. And we also found that people were limited in how they could use the financial services. Now, you were saying about when you're starting to access mobile money, you found that that is the first step onto the journey. So one of the other policy recommendations was ensuring that all government payments should be made through mobile, and any payments that you make to government should also be done through that format. We also found, when we were looking at trade and MSME opportunity, that there was a lack of access to markets. And we then found that women were much less likely to export. So there's an opportunity around using mobile to be able to help support export as well. We also found that collateral was an issue, so we were making recommendations around using alternative forms of collateral and how we could develop credit histories when perhaps people lacked some of the formal documents that would allow them to engage in more traditional formats. And then leading on to your point around land rights and property rights, we also made recommendations around reforming the legal barriers that stop women being able to access property. So the recommendations really are a key tie-up of many of the points that have been made in this panel already and a lot of the wider points that have been made today. But the dial is moving. Unfortunately, it is moving too slowly, still.
Thanks, Helen. And Helen is herself an entrepreneur in the UK and is very involved in the Small Business Association over there. So
Yeah.
it's speaking of this, of what Tukia has mentioned about the need for more stakeholders to be involved. I'd just like quickly to ask each panelist to extrapolate a little bit on who should be brought into the party to help make this happen. Tukia, would you mind taking it first?
Thank you. In fact, when we look at the General Action Plan, action points number 8 and number 9 recognize the need for us to work with various stakeholders, ranging from the private sector, government institutions, donor agencies, NGOs, academia, and everyone. I think it's really a matter of, as I said earlier, interrogating what are the problem areas and who needs to take action. In my own experience, we, for instance, have worked with the ILO, and they have helped us bring consciousness and desensitization to the commercial banks in Zambia on the need to better serve the women's market segment. And I think probably that's a stakeholder that we could be considering broadly. Your own organization, the Global Banking Alliance, this is an organization that actually then goes into the commercial banks and teaches them how to develop a women's market strategy. And again, this is addressing the commercial banks. When it comes to the fintechs, we've heard during the course of this GPF just how much potential lies in the fintechs. There are various areas that need to be addressed there. Digital literacy, for example. So we need to be identifying who can assist us with those issues. And it's really a matter of calling upon all the actors within this area of financial inclusion, and at this point in time, particularly the fintechs, to look at what is it that they can do in terms of advancing women's financial inclusion, and to mainstream those activities and not treat them as add-ons. I think that has been the main problem. There must be this looking at what solutions can be offered to the women's market segment. And I think if the various actors in this sector can take it upon themselves, we're going to see much more accelerated access of women to finance.
Love that idea of getting the fintechs to focus on gender, which they generally Have not so far. Julia, what about the lawyers and how can we get them more involved in this dialogue?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent recommendation. Just follows up what Dr. Tukia was saying. Let's look at the private sector, but not only the financial sector. Let's look at women lawyers associations. Women lawyers are the ones who really know what are the legal barriers that women face on a daily basis. How is the situation? How is the law different for women compared to men? And they're also the ones who would have practical solutions. And equally in the public sector, let's talk to female parliamentarians or female judges associations, because again, they're the one drafting and applying the laws, and they would know where the gaps and omissions are and how laws can be reformed.
Thanks, Julia. And Nathan, what about your take on who else should be involved?
Well, I think the obvious answer is men. I think that there is a risk that we start to think of the financial inclusion of women as an issue that is just about women, just a women's issue. Of course, it is fundamentally about women, but it's about living in a just and prosperous society, and that should be an objective that's in the interest of every person, whether you're a man or a woman. And I would challenge the men in the room. I'm sure all of you support the idea of the financial inclusion of women, but to think, what are you doing personally to use your influence to help actually advance that agenda? I want in my career to have a positive impact on financial inclusion, and this is the biggest opportunity to do that, because the financial inclusion of women is one of the biggest challenges that we face. So I think ensuring that men are involved in this conversation is so important. That's not in any way to negate the importance of women's voices as well in this conversation, but also in conversations that are not specifically about the financial inclusion of women. But fundamentally, if we don't have men involved in the conversation, then we're not designing the conversation in a way that will be successful.
Well said. And Julia, as a client, as an entrepreneur, tell us a little bit about the importance of business associations in the ecosystem to support more innovation.
I think a really simple example would be, if we look at the B20, the representatives on the B20 are all large business, and it is an all-male group. Whereas we heard earlier today that 99% of businesses globally are SMEs. So when we are talking about ensuring that the voice of business is heard, we need to ensure that the voice of all businesses are heard, and business associations that represent either key sectors or demographics are equally as important, but they tend to be quite narrowly focused on their issues. So it's really important that business associations can collaborate so that they can raise wider cross-sectoral issues, and if we are going to have effective legislation and effective legal frameworks, then we need to ensure that people work together and that those voices are amplified, especially when you are talking about the most marginalised groups. Because we know that from one of the panels we were listening to earlier today, SMEs were, I think it was somebody mentioned about spending 25 hours filling in financial application paperwork for loans. SMEs generally do not have lots of available time. And the role of those associations that then represent them allow them to go and run their business where they have their expertise, but they allow their requirements, their needs and their challenges to be amplified up to a national government level. I also think that the idea that you mentioned around collaboration, ensuring that wider stakeholders are involved, is really, really important. And we have a great example in Wales that we've just been able to bring to the fore. So we have obviously devolved government. So in Scotland, they have a national framework for women's enterprise. And I felt that this was a really good idea. And I approached the Welsh Government with the concept of developing this as a national project. And we were able to get 24 organisations together. So we had our National Development Bank, we had our incubators, we had our Accelerator Growth Programme, universities, entrepreneurs, third sector, and a range of other key players. We then looked at how we would take this context that the Scottish had developed, adapt that for the cultural situation within Wales, and develop our own framework. So over the course of 2 years, we have now got to the stage where in November we will be launching a new national framework for Wales with a focus on how we accelerate women into enterprise, and then not only how do we help sustain them, but how do we facilitate them to grow? Because we know that women do want to grow businesses. They don't want to remain SMEs. So I think this idea around broadening your perspective from outside the fintech sector and outside the financial services sector is absolutely key. We need to have much wider collaboration if we are really going to solve this problem, because otherwise we will get back to the situation we discussed right at the beginning about the fact that we are still stuck.
Thanks, Julia. Well, I hope the audience has gotten a good sense of the wide and broad ecosystem and the kind of stakeholders that need to be involved. I think there's a lot of progress. I think, we will. I think 10 years from now, we're not going to see that 9%. But I was asked, there's one member in the audience wants to ask a question, and I thought in the interest of walking the talk and being participatory, if they'd like to ask a question that's short and hopefully easy to answer. Okay, 2. Well, Afi can tell me how many.
Okay, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Before going to my question, let me take this opportunity to thank the AFI and Bank of Russia for this event on behalf of the Central Bank of Afghanistan. So, in regards to women, before that, I have to tell you that I am a member of the Gender and Women Financial Inclusion Committee. I didn't have the opportunity to meet Ms. Tokia, and during the meetings, I wanted to just have some comments, maybe some questions at the end about the financial inclusion of women. As you know, most of the problem comes from the women financial inclusion in Muslim countries. Like, we have a lot of barriers in Muslim countries for women. About 1.8 billion Muslims live in the world, and majority of these countries are members of Alliance for Financial Inclusion. But they have a lot of problems, such as cultural problem, religious problem, and other problems. I would like to also recall the comments yesterday raised from the Bank of Russia about the barriers that they pointed out in their financial inclusion strategy, which was physical barrier, mental barriers, affordability barriers, and also product range barriers. So I would like to add one more barrier for our country-type countries, like environmental barrier. Like, we have cultural problems, we have religious problems for women. Interest on loans are very sensitive in Muslim religion and Islam religion. So I think if AFI and other stakeholders for financial inclusion work together to like East Asia, East Europe and Central Asia initiative, regional initiative, they can form some sort of regional initiative for the Muslim countries in the region, or maybe all over the world, to discuss the specific problems for women in regards to financial inclusion. Because majority of the problems are common in the world, but for countries, Muslim countries, the problems are different from other countries. Maybe some of them are common, but most of them are, as the lady said about the problems of going outside, getting permission from husband or letter, or I don't know. So whatever. So these are all the problems that should be discussed in a regional platform or something to specify the specific problems of Muslim countries' women for financial inclusion. Thank you very much.
Okay, Thanks, point well taken, I think. The gentleman in the front row. Could we have a microphone, please? Front.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to push Nathan's point. You know, Nathan made a very important point that, look, we cannot just look at the whole universality of gender gap with the whole financial system. Let's look at success cases, and that's what Nathan is saying. When you look at mobile phone accounts, you don't have any gender gap. But what has happened in successful cases? Gone back, they have moved forward and introduced virtual savings accounts, and that you are aware of that. And then they have used those transactions data and savings data to come up even with a virtual credit account and even a method of pricing those short-term credit. That is a new way of collateral technology that is emerging, and that's what Helen was mentioning. So we essentially, within the same system, we have a situation where the developments are actually helping the movement further into more crossing the gender gap in a very developmental way. So in a sense, we may want to say, look, why don't we also have case studies of those successful cases that can help us actually understand that. And I'm looking at these products in terms of the East African region, the M-Shwari in Kenya, Empower in Tanzania, More Cash in Uganda, and even More Cash in Rwanda. And if you look at them, look at who is taking up the loans, who is saving, you'll find that there's no gender gap. So maybe in AFI in future, we may want to bring out some of these successful case studies and then argue that this is what we need to showcase. And in the end, we may find that it is the tail that will be wagging the dog and we cross the gender gap.
Well said. One last question. Put his hand up first. If you keep it short, please.
Thank you, panelists. My question just direct to the lawyer, renowned lawyer. You have mentioned in your deliberation that in one country, I have erased the name from my memory. The woman required to produce ID card. But you know, after promulgation of AML CFT, which is considered to be the hindrance to aggressive financial inclusion, so is it not required for men also in that country? So my simple question. And regarding Muslims' entrance to...
Did you hear the question?
Regarding Bangladesh context, I am representing Microcredit Regulatory Authority. It deals with 3.5 million people. Out of them, 91% is women. So that should be incorporated in the Findex data properly. Supplement with my other colleagues.
Julia, do you want to take the first question?
I have a kind of two comments, and I think it relates to the question on identification and to this idea about social norms and cultural norms and how they relate with the legal framework. So starting with the ID cards, our research has found that in 11 economies around the world, the application processes differ for men and women. And these differences can be small procedural differences. For example, that a woman has to bring documentation about her husband. That when she's married, she needs to provide her husband's name. Sometimes she needs to provide information about her husband's profession, or even she needs to bring, his permission. And these things seem small. It's, one additional procedural step. But it sets women behind men because they need an additional requirement, an additional document, an additional permission. And what we see in our report, which, by the way, you can look at all this data and all these data that we collect for the 189 economies, you can see it on our website and just put women, business, and the law in your browser, and you can look at it, including links to these laws. So what we see is the accumulation of these legal barriers put women behind men. And so it's really important to change the law, because that changes financial inclusion. And we correlate our legal barriers, our findings on legal barriers, with economic and financial outcomes. And you can see very clearly that where the law is unequal for women, that influences financial inclusion for women.
You have narrated that it requires additional documents, but after promulgation of AML-CFT outlines, you should look into the definition of family. You have said that while female person go to the bank or other financial institution, he or she required to submit document. Is it? But in case of man also, as per latest definition as outlined in AML-CFT rule regulation, the man also required to submit his wife, spouse, full details, not a spouse, the whole family. Family it ranges up to the son, daughter, or other also. So it's for both. It's for both, not for in one way.
Yeah, again, it really depends on the country, and I'm really excited to be talking about this with you after the panel. But again, for our research, our methodology, we see differences that apply to women and do not apply to men.
Okay, thank you very much for your participation. We welcome the interventions from the audience. In particular, I think the idea of a gentleman from Kenya talking about highlighting what's working, which is, there's a lot of things working, and perhaps next time at GPF we can have a workshop on what is really working for women and financial access and use. So thank you very much to the panelists. I hope everybody enjoyed it and found it enriching, and of course we're all here afterwards to answer any questions that we may be able to answer. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, can we also give a round of applause for our moderator and the theme setter? Thank you. We'll excuse the panel from the stage, and once again, just to echo our moderator's comments, we do apologize that we are not able to discuss, and I'm sure that there are many, many other questions that you may have at this point. However, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move straight into our next session. And this, of course, is the AFI Partnership Champion Special Recognition. So let's give Eliki Mboletawa a round of applause as he comes up on stage to commence with this part of the program. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor and pleasure to welcome you to the AFI Partnerships Champions Special Recognition Ceremony. AFI's growth has been bolstered by the support of its partners in advancing the financial inclusion agenda. These include like-minded funding partners who contribute unique knowledge, insights, and financial resources to advance AFI's mission and scale up our broad range of member services and offerings. In addition, AFI engages the private sector through our public-private dialogue platform, the AFI PPD, to leverage on and enhance effective implementation of financial inclusion policies. AFI also receives knowledge and logistic support from strategic knowledge partners who help to enhance members' capacity to develop and implement policy solutions. First, we would like to acknowledge our funding partners, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, AFI's founding partner, whose support has been instrumental to help advance digital financial services. The German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, that has partnered with AFI to advance SME finance, capacity building, gender and financial inclusion for women, financial inclusion for forcibly displaced persons, and work at the regional level in Africa, Arab region, and elsewhere. The Omidyar Network, which has supported AFI's transition to independence and the rollout of AFI's global workstream on FinTech, RegTech. The International Development Research Center, IDRC Canada, for supporting AFI's work on gender, digital finance, consumer protection, and financial inclusion, data, and for IDRC's integral role in enabling the launch of AFI's regional initiative in Latin America and the Caribbean. Data2X, for providing 2 small pilot grants to support the collection of sex-desegregated data. More recently, AFI received funding from the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Building and Nuclear Safety, the BMU, to implement a new workstream on financial inclusion and climate change. We have also partnered with the French Development Agency, AFD, to scale up digital finance in Africa and beyond, beginning with joint work to advance digitization of microfinance in Africa. We also would like to recognize AFI's current private sector partners that have significantly raised awareness among AFI members of emerging technologies, innovative products and services, and regulatory opportunities and risks, particularly in digital financial services. These partners are Visa, MasterCard, GSMA, Transfer2, and Letshego. Finally, we would like to acknowledge AFI's key strategic technical cooperation partner, the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ, whose collaboration and support throughout AFI's evolution has been instrumental to our network's success. May I kindly request the presence of Mr. Norbert Mumba, the Deputy Executive Director of the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, to please come on stage to present the special recognition. We would like to invite a representative from each of these organizations to come up on stage to receive an AFI medallion, a token of appreciation for your efforts and commitment to the network. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, Omidyar Network, the International Development Research Center, IDRC Canada, Data2X, the Federal Ministry of Environment, Nature Conservation, Building and Nuclear Safety, BMU, Visa, MasterCard, GSMA, Transfer2, and Letshego, the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ, and the French Development Agency. Unfortunately, the president from the IDRC, Jean Lebel, could not be with us at this GPF this year, but we are grateful that he was able to send a special video address which we would like to play for you now. But first, we would like to hand over the medallion and have a group photo, which we will then follow with a video.
Good morning. My name is Jean Lebel. I'm the president of the International Development Research Center, a Canadian corporation that invests in knowledge, innovation, and solutions to improve lives and livelihood in the developing world. Unfortunately, I can't join you in person today in Sochi, but I am with you in spirit and on the screen. This year, Global Policy Forum, organized by the Bank of Russia and the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, once again provides a unique opportunity for delegates from the 60 AFI member countries to highlight and review progress made towards greater access and use of appropriate financial services, particularly for the rural poor and women. Most importantly, it provides an opportunity to explore solutions to persistent gaps. In addition, this year's forum marks a special milestone, the 10th anniversary of the creation of the AFI and its work to advance financial inclusion, something close to all of our hearts. I'm honored to accept the Special Partnership Recognition Award. It illustrates the close relationship between AFI and IDRC. As you know, some of you, in 2016, we entered into a 3-year partnership to develop new knowledge and foster policy peer learning. This agreement has been bearing fruit. Together, we have made significant progress through initiatives that promotes global collaboration to advance financial inclusion for women and girls, using financial inclusion data to improve policy, particularly through sex disaggregated data, financial literacy and consumer protections, digital finance, national financial inclusion strategy. One component of our partnership includes the launching of the Financial Inclusion Initiative for Latin America and the Caribbean, which is highly valued by its members and is helping advance policy change. FILAC, as it is called, is helping to enhance policies and regulation to scale solutions for financial inclusion for the most vulnerable. This is accomplished through research, peer learning, and capacity support for policymakers and financial regulators. The partnership between AFI and IDRC is also developing a unique cooperation model for financial inclusion, expanding AFI Partners Network to collaborate with the official think tank group and women engagement group of the G20. I understand they will also be presenting during the Global Forum. There are just a few of the many fruits of our partnership. I think that we can all be proud of all this work and of the work we will be carrying out in the future to implement AFI's Action Plan for Gender and Women's Financial Inclusion, the DINARO Action Plan, and to obtain more commitments to the Maya Declaration, which, as you know, aims to address the gender gap. This is a key component to our partnership. In closing, let me say once again how pleased we are to partner with AFI to foster financial inclusion that can enhance the livelihoods of vulnerable people. Best regards from all of us here at IDRC to all the delegates at the Global Policy Forum. And I wish you all a most successful conference. Thank you very much. Have a nice meeting. Goodbye from Ottawa.
There are many other valuable partners and stakeholders that have helped AFI and its members develop and implement successful financial inclusion policies. While we are not able to recognize everyone this afternoon, we look forward to further collaboration with a growing spectrum of partners and stakeholders. May I extend my heartfelt congratulations to all our partners and convey AFI's gratitude for all your contributions. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please another round of applause. Thank you very much, Eliki. We've come to our final plenary session, ladies and gentlemen, the achieving the Sustainable Development Goals through Financial Inclusion. And for this session, I'd like to invite the panelists to please come and take their seats up on stage. The moderator for this session will introduce the individual panelists for this session. So we'll just ask all our panelists to take their seats. And the moderator for this session, ladies and gentlemen, is the lead financial sector specialist from CGAP, Michael Tarazi. Please make him feel welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm Michael Tarazi. I'm known to several of you, and those of you who are familiar with my moderation know that I always start with a few confessions. The first confession is that all my life I've wanted to have my own talk show. So I'm super excited. I've been given the opportunity to moderate this session, and for the next hour I get to pretend that I'm Oprah Winfrey. My second confession is that I really am honored to be here. Alfred mentioned yesterday morning that I'm one of a handful of people that have attended every AFI GPF. And over the last decade, I have seen AFI evolve from an interesting and exciting idea to truly an alliance for financial inclusion. And perhaps more importantly than an alliance, a community. For me, this is really very much a community, a family of like-minded people that get together, exchange information, create professional and personal relationships. And it's that personal connection that really gives AFI the momentum that allows it to succeed the way it has. So on behalf of CGAP as an institution and all my colleagues there, many of whom work very closely with you, my colleagues Ivo and Stefan, we're in Russia so I combine them into one person named Ivan, Ivo and Stefan who are here with me this year, and myself personally, thank you very much for the CGAP-AFI partnership over the last decade, and we look forward to continuing that. My third confession has to do with our panel on SDGs. If you take a look at our panelists and keep in mind that our one SDG is around gender equality, you will see that we have a long way to go on the SDGs. Before we start with our panelists, let me introduce them real quick. We have immediately closest to me, Governor Dubois from the Central Bank of Haiti, Governor El-Shawa from the Palestine Monetary Authority, and two representatives from the development agencies, Andreas Proch from GIZ and Leo Gabory from AFD. Just so you're aware, Governor of Haiti and Leo will be speaking in French, so please have your headphones ready. Before I start with them, I want to do just one interactive exercise, which is going to be a vote, just to get a sense of where the audience is. If we can get the question up on the screen, and then I'll explain to you how to actually vote. So the first question, just to get a sense of where you're all at. My institution focuses on financial sector stability, not the SDGs. You strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or what's the SDGs? So in order to vote, you go onto the application, the AFI 2018 app, you click on the agenda, you go to this session on the agenda. You click on this session and you scroll down, you'll see some live polling questions. Go on to poll question 1. You should see this. Pick your answer, then you continue and you exit. Okay? Give you just a few seconds to do that. Have you had a chance to vote? Raise your hand just so I get an idea if you've had a chance to vote. Okay, let's see where we came out. All right. My institution focuses on financial stability and systems, not the SDGs. Close to 60, oh, we're still moving. More than 60% of you, or 60%, okay, stop. Or do I need to stop? Stop voting. 60% of you has said that this is not really your priority, which is very interesting and of course kind of predictable given that you are financial institutions representing, financial regulators and policymakers, that the SDGs are not really the framework by which you operate. So help us delve more into that. We're going to turn to our panel and I'm going to start with Governor Dubois. Can you tell me a bit, as a governor of a central bank, how do you look at the SDGs? Do they really influence what you do, or is this just a nice framework by which we justify what we're doing?
Merci, Michael. Je crois que...
I think I have been thinking about the answer, but before I will start, I would like to congratulate all the members, the AFI, for such a great organization. I would like to say just wow. In order to answer your question, Michael, I will have to say that it's quite interesting. The central bank is not the entity which is charged to monitor the SDGs. So the Sustainable Development Goals and all the central banks, like all of them, our central bank has a role to manage the global economy via the monetary base, whereas the exchange rate has to control inflation and also either inflation or employment. And on the other hand, we have 17 SDGs, which have an universal appeal to protect the planet, to assure peace and prosperity for all. And we have 169 targets to be implemented by 2020. And that means climate change, resilience to catastrophes, peace, equality, and economic growth and employment. Being a regulator of the financial system, it's obvious that the central bank can play an essential role to support these SDGs. And otherwise, having the responsibility of financial stability and to give financing to the social excluded people to push their financial inclusion. Regarding the central bank, the realization of the SDGs, we need international financing, national financing, public and private massive financing, which is often late for the fragile countries or poor countries like Haiti. We are fragile, more we need resources, more we need to make efforts to stabilize at the microeconomic level, and which is often undermined by natural catastrophes. And every time the country finds itself in need for a new stabilization program. That all means that the central bank helps to the SDGs, but its monetary politics harmonize with its strategy of financial inclusion inevitably comes to the SDGs and their implementation. In the case of Haiti, if I can say, we need to fight against inequalities in the public politics, and from this regard, the Central Bank of Haiti could implement a monetary politics capable to support sufficiently sustainable economic growth, solid and inclusive, and to harmonize our financial politic for the stability in continuous way. And we have adopted a monetary approach for the growth, which allowed to the financial institutions to have a big added value in the agriculture. We have started housing programs which are aligned with the SDGs. And I have to say that this growth program it represents a progress, and we need to work with the public financial agencies, with the national banks. At the moment, aligning our strategy of financial inclusion with our monetary agenda for economic growth to allow access to credits to the individuals and to the SMEs pushes us directly to the implementation of the SDGs. And we have aligned, our bank has aligned its strategy of financial inclusion to the approach for the economic growth into the SDGs. And at the level of the financial committee, we have understood that this alignment with our international partners puts Haiti to the sustainable development and to the implementation of SDGs. Thank you.
For the connection between financial services and the SDGs, and the fact that they are an enabler of the SDGs. And you gave us the perspective of a governor of a central bank in an independent country. But I want to move to your colleague from Palestine, which, let's be very clear, is not an independent country. And I think many people looking at the situation right now would be focused on a lot of issues that seem much larger than financial inclusion. You have arguably, you are still under occupation according to the Fourth Geneva Convention. You do not control your own territory. You do not control your own water resources. You have limitations on your freedom of movement. You have the longest standing refugee population in the world. Political prisoners, child prisoners, torture, the list unfortunately goes on, much to the shame of the world. Many people would look at you and say, why are you focused on financial inclusion? Don't you have some bigger issues that you should be focusing on right now from a point of view of development? How would you respond to that?
Michael, first let me thank again the Central Bank of Russia and the AFI for this really great effort of bringing us all here. And thank you for your leadership in doing what we are doing. I liked your opening, but nevertheless, I think what you said a while ago about we're not independent yet. We are still our whole sovereigns of or the country is peace here and peace there, and we are not really. We're not really like any other country in the world. Let's make it very simple. But at least in Palestine, the only good thing about it is this is driving us all the time is to work harder to, instead of talking about the political life, do something about it. We have this kind of school also, at least in the PMA, which is represent the central bank and the banking sector. So that's why you will see that more needs actually to the financial inclusion. Because since we cannot be everywhere because of the political status, meaning we have to serve the public, and serving the public, and this is push us to be creative in coming out with the new services that can be done by remote, where we do financial inclusion also through a week. Every year there is 1 week that we do activities with the old banks and universities and schools, and that's something that we feel that at least either we go to the villages and towns, or bring the students to where we have like one center that has all the programs about different things we have in banking. Of course, this has forced us to also to be pushing the services. And like this year, we passed the law for the electronic signature, plus that also covers a lot of all the payment system and others. That's we have long time, but at least at this time, this year we should finish two important projects. One of it is the phone banking. The platform will be ready hopefully by the end of the year, and also even the e-clearing, which is going to be something that you can maybe from distance, that you don't have. Just use the image of the check and can be deposited at the bank from far away. We still need to work harder, but I know that at least at this time, looking at other experiences of countries, really we see that I'm proud of what we are doing so far. I know that my team who's working on this is really putting a lot of hard work and pushing banks, toward that. Banks, they are really also, which is good that they are on the same side or the same page. We all, which is you need them because they're the one who is going to be they're delivering the services. At least we prepare the platform for them and the technology and the know-how. But at the end of the day, banks has to do the service. This is among the 15 banks that we have licensed. It's amazing, but we're doing it. Especially like also you have the issue of the West Bank on one side, the Gaza on the other side, and we're responsible for the supervision, and we're responsible for doing all the upgrade and the updates, and also it's not only the technology, it's the people who are using the technology. We have to make sure that somehow we reach out to them and do the training, the proper training for the PMA and also for the banks, and sometimes for the customers.
Good. Let me follow up, because I am just to make sure that I'm following. You have a divided population, and you are effectively like the South Pacific in the sense that you live on little islands, even though it's not really an island. You're surrounded by land, but you cannot freely move from one to the other. So is digital finance a way of circumventing that problem? Are you able then to send money more easily because it is all digital, and therefore you can actually facilitate access despite the political situation?
And at this time, this is what we are doing, and we're pushing more electronic service throughout the Gaza and the West Bank. And actually, you can. For example, we had to find a way of how to move the actual cash. That's the only problem that we have, which is we have a system, but it falls under politics sometimes.
Yeah.
But at least the rest of it, no, we're fine. We're covering all the services that needed where people can have equal services if they are residing in Gaza or residing in the West Bank.
Let me move on to our representatives from the development agencies, and I'm just kind of curious. The SDGs do not state financial inclusion as one of the goals. And so do you find that there is a danger that financial inclusion could be minimized its importance or lost in the development agenda because it's not specifically called out? Maybe, Andreas, you can take that question.
Well, I don't really see this danger. I recently visited a village in India, and while I was walking through this village, it all of a sudden occurred to me that during the last 2 years, I have spent more time on such international panels and in international conferences than in poor villages in our partner countries. And while walking through this village, I asked myself, I can talk fluently in hours about financial inclusion, about the SDGs, but what is really the impact, the importance of this talk for the poor widow whom I was sitting in the courtyard, or the poor smallholder farmer who was desperately trying at the end of the day to make the two ends meet. First of all, I decided I should rebalance the use of my own time between really going to partner organizations and going to our target groups in one hand and sitting on international panels. And I also think we should rethink our approach to the SDGs and the financial inclusion. I think we are all perfect in juggling the SDG numbers. And when I have discussions in my own organization, I hear from every side, I have SDG 1, 9, 11, 5, 10, and everyone says, I have done my reference to the SDGs, so I think everything is fine. And this is not enough at all. First of all, by juggling the numbers, we very often forget that there are underlying principles, and these underlying principles are quite often much more important than the different SDGs. For instance, the principle of leave no one behind. If you really take this serious, it would change the work of a lot of our organizations. This is number one. And then the SDGs should be seen as an urgent call for an integrated approach. We all work in silos. We are all in the danger of being caught in silos. And the SDGs are really a call to not divert our attention into different SDGs, but to have an integrated approach. And I think the focus on financial inclusion helps there a lot.
But I'm still a little bit confused about what you do when you get all these number juggling. If you're sitting there internally at GIZ and everyone's saying, oh, SDG 5, SDG 7, SDG 8, and then someone says, hey, I have a financial inclusion project, and it doesn't fit in one of the SDGs. What do they do? How do they sell that internally? Is it really as easy as you say, or do they feel some pressure to try to make it fit? Because that's the paradigm we have.
Well, in my organization, we really have decided to stop the SDG numbering and the juggling. Okay. We are really try to let our people explain, not in SDG numbers, but really in detail, what is the impact they are doing for our partner organizations, for our partner countries, to what extent are we fulfilling the underlying principles, and then we can also refer to one or the other SDG. But the spirit of the SDGs and the spirit of financial inclusion are the more important indicators. Are we really acting within the spirit of this new worldwide agenda or not? This is really what we try to change, having a different attitude to what we are doing and how are we doing it. Mm-hmm. This is a long travel, this is a long way. We have just started this trip, but we hope we are making progress.
Okay. Let me hear from AFD, because it's great to hear that. This is sort of the first time I've heard from a donor agency, although I haven't spoken to GIZ before, so I'm not doubting you. But most of them are beginning to hear, like, wait a minute, we have a new paradigm and we're struggling with this. What about AFD? Would you say that it's still business as usual, or are things a bit more difficult from the financial inclusion front?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to express the gratitude of the French Development Agency to the Central Bank of Russia and AFI for the organization of the Global Policy Forum. It's really an honor for our institution, our French institution, to be present here with all the AFI members in Sochi. So thank you very much, Fred. Maintenant, je vais continuer mon interlocution en français, parce que nous sommes sur la...
I'll continue in French. We spent this time speaking English, donc so I'll try to sort of to simplify it to the French speakers. What I'm saying is, on this subject, how financial inclusion fits in the SDGs. In fact, c'est un outil, this is a tool rather than the goal in terms of the SDGs. When we're talking of the SDGs, there is a bunch of them: stop hunger, stop war, etc. And I'd rather like to explain what is it these SDG to an economic actor. That's economic growth, social inclusion within a country or a region, and human activity and environmental protection. Which makes it rather simple. So the question is, how the global financial industry can contribute to these goals. We at the French Development Agency, since for the last 50 years, were working in the countries, in different countries of the world, adding whatever we can to the financial sectors of those countries in order to promote the financial inclusion and the sustainable development. So this principle goes ahead of every number of the SDGs that we have. Now, in what manner can the financial inclusion help the SDGs? We believe that it has to reply to a certain demand from whatever sector it is. This financial contribution in the financial sector should cover all those millions of the population which have no access to help them to create a financial system, not just a bank account, which is important, don't get me wrong, but take a systematic approach to it. Agence Française is helping the inclusive financial sector, and I'd like to share with you 3 ideas in brief. Just in a few minutes, we have spent 50 years working on this thematic, on these subjects. We help the central banks to build up a framework, a legal framework. We're helping the microfinancial institution to provide credit coverage to small and medium companies, and these responds to the needs of the financial inclusion. But often it's not responding exhaustively. So we have decided to go into a more systemic way after the financial inclusion support. If you look at a single actor, it might be sufficient, but if we decided to look at the ecosystem in general, in all its size. So for those who are supervising those ecosystems, should be encouraged to facilitate in the interaction between various interested parties, various stakeholders. This logic push us to be more in partnership, as by the past we had quite a few partners, the CGAP, SPTF, and plenty of sectoral initiatives. But we believe that in coming years we should be even more in partnership with new actors, which impacts policy and results of this program.
So your point is basically the SDGs are not necessarily something that really you feel sort of shackled by, that you have to sort of fit them in there like GIZ. You don't necessarily have to say, okay, this fits here, this fits here. We can take a market systems approach, and you're not concerned about financial inclusion not being mentioned as an SDG. From your perspective, this is not a problem. You can still support financial inclusion initiatives. It still has the same priority as it has in the past. Just quickly, yes or no from both of you. Literally yes or no?
No.
It's still okay?
Yeah, it's still okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the same with you, Andreas?
No. Do you want to give it? No.
Okay. No, we don't see it a major problem that financial inclusion is not particularly mentioned in the SDG. The financial services are mentioned quite often. Really, as I said before, the principles behind the SDGs, like leave no one behind, are really the label to tackle the issue with the financial inclusion very well. Rather stick to the principles, rather stick to the attitudes, and not so much to each and every formulated SDG.
Let me gauge again the audience. I didn't think we had enough time for this, but let's go on to the second question. I'm just kind of curious to see if the audience sort of agrees with this general level of comfort with the SDGs and financial inclusion. If we can go to the connection between the two. If we can go to poll question 2. And again, if you can go back to the application and vote on this, the question is, because financial inclusion is not an SDG, financial inclusion may become increasingly irrelevant. Again, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. Actually, it's the SDGs themselves that are becoming irrelevant. Go ahead and vote for one of those. I'll give you just a few seconds. And let's see where we come up with. Okay, so more than half of you believe that they are not in danger of becoming irrelevant, and that's great news. I think that that's terrific to be able to see. Can you see that? We have 5% agree. There's about just around 14% who actually think that there is a risk, but that's a pretty small minority. So that's great news that people are not seeing a problem by the fact that financial inclusion is not listed as an SDG. What about the question of evidence? How do you, as governors, Governor Oshawa and Governor Dubois, how do you think about the question of evidence when someone says, well, what's the connection between the two? I mean, yes, we can make this argument, it's enabler, but prove it. Do you feel that pressure to have some evidence there? Are you familiar with any evidence?
I think, non, je pense que il y a.
I think there is plenty of evidence. Very simply, I'm taking the case. I'm taking the case of Haiti. The very first objective, the very fundamental objective on the list is the well-being of every people on the globe. That's the fundamental. How could we talk of the well-being when you're excluded? We should start by including people or assisting people to get rid of poverty, and then get to the level of well-being which is required. So financial inclusion fits very well with the objective of the development, of the sustainable development. To me, talking of the SDG is talking of the financial inclusion. Well, the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal number 1, unless I'm mistaken. Let me refresh. It is a reduction of poverty. Okay, on joue avec les chiffres. We play with numbers, but in fact, that's the number one. And then SDG 8, economic growth, and 11 is the sustainable production. So Haiti, as a poor country, which had to bear several shocks, mostly external, which hit tremendously the GDP of Haiti. So the partners, our international partners, are mostly talking to us in terms of stability and encouraging growth. We're trying to develop the credit line to small and medium enterprises, and all of this to say that the financial inclusion to us is something fundamental. We're just including all the aspects, be it poverty, be it growth, for a poor country is part of the SDG. Especially if the country's economy is fragile. We can get to this goal only in case we achieve all over well-being. Thank you, Governor. Merci.
And I agree with you, Governor Dubois. All of that logically makes perfect sense. How financial inclusion is about the welfare of everyone. Instinctively, if you're not including them, how can they benefit? But I think you're aware of sort of the populist trend that's happening around the world, at least in the United States, in Brexit. And there is a sense of how do we justify our ongoing commitment to financial inclusion if we don't see the evidence? We need to tell our populations that, yes, we know this works. And I'm going to get to this evidence question to the audience in just a moment. Before I go there, I want to hear from Governor Shawa. Do you know that what you're doing really is supporting your development goals in the occupied Palestinian territories?
Yeah, again, living under this kind of political situation, it push every responsible Palestinian and the friends of Palestine, like people
Sorry,
around
Governor,
here.
I just got an email actually saying, can you please ask the governor to speak more closely to the microphone? So maybe you just hold it in front of you.
Yeah, sure. Living under the political situation, the way you described it, and probably a lot of you are aware, it put a lot of pressure on every single official who was in this field or in the private sector, where to make sure that we are really are touching exactly and to see that things are working or not working. For example, since we adopted financial inclusion strategy, and the growth in the women, for example, in the women financial inclusion, it's the last 3 years, it's 140% of the percentage since we started till today. The SMEs and the way we adopted where it helps into the financial inclusion, which is in Palestine, almost 90% of the companies or the institutions who are they're considered SMEs. The last 4 years, when we started till today, we're talking about 160%. So this is, I'm giving you just an example of two important indicators. Now we're adopting the green loans, green lending, the green business, where also we're facilitating that. We see that this is also will create more new jobs, because you have a lot of areas that still have an issue with electricity. For example, Gaza, since with all this closure, always they don't have electricity. People are going into that, so we're encouraging banks to lend. So that's real life, real time financial inclusion. examples. Also, we need a lot of job creation. So one of the good things today, the new generation who are finished from universities, they're kind of more into the technology, and they can do a business by distance. That's another sigma and another sector that we are really we're seeing it by statistics or by numbers. The other thing is we are aligning with the government on a national strategy for the financial inclusion. And officially we're going to launch it in this December. I hope all of you can come to Palestine and celebrate with us that important event. This is all of it has parameters and has segments.
Are you suggesting next year's GPF will be in Palestine, or we'll see? Well, we'll hear about that. Yeah.
It'll be our pleasure.
Well,
We'd love to have you all.
It will be the first one I miss because unfortunately they won't let me in anymore, the Israelis. But anyway, we digress. Let me ask a final question to the audience. If you can go on to the next question about evidence. And I want to stress on the question of evidence because I do think we're getting a lot of pushback from a lot of sectors saying, wait, how do you know that financial inclusion really leads to the development goals? So we do have one evidence I want to share with you, and thank you, Governor Dubois, for mentioning SDG 1, end poverty is the first SDG. The spread of mobile money in Kenya has lifted approximately how many people out of extreme poverty? This is according to a study that was done by Jack and Suri out of MIT. 500,000? 750,000? 1 million? 10 billion? If you choose 10 billion, please see me after the show. We have to have a little discussion. So go ahead and vote. Just give me a quick hand raise if you voted, just so I know. Have you voted? Good? Okay. Okay. Yeah, there's the 1% of you who hopefully just didn't understand the question. 3%. Uh-oh, we should stop the voting now, please. All right, actually, Governor Ndungu, do you, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but which one did you vote for? Or former Governor Ndungu, excuse me, but. Huh? Okay, I probably should not have put you on the spot because the answer is actually 1 million. So half of you did get that right. We actually have some concrete evidence, and I think it is really important that we're aware of this. There is concrete evidence that financial inclusion is an enabler of the SDGs. And this is just one study AFI put together recently, I think in partnership with some other organizations that unfortunately escape my mind right now, but perhaps Klaus can remind me, has put together actually a very interesting compilation of all the different research and studies that have been done out there that really directly show the evidence and the link between financial inclusion and the SDGs. I think we need a lot more. I think that would be an area ripe for investigation, but you can never have too much, and I think that would be an area that can continue to grow. But we do have that evidence, and I think that's a really important positive note to end on. I apologize. We don't have much more time left because the governor has to head off to catch a plane, but I wanted just to end with one final question, which is what can AFI as a network, as a community, do to really promote financial inclusion in service of the SDGs? Is there something that they're doing that they should be doing that they're not already, or something that they are doing that you want to call out, advice for this group as a community? Let's start with maybe on that end of the room, AFD or GIZ. Anyone want to jump in there? Leo, you speak English perfectly. Why are you pretending you're listening to the translation?
Because I didn't hear the governor of Palestine. So it was better with the translator. I'm sorry. So the question was about partnership, isn't it?
About AFI, just in general. What advice do you have for AFI on this question? Is there something that they could be doing or that we could be doing that we're not, or something that we're doing well? And actually, I should point out that, this has been mentioned several times already, but the initiative on climate change, I think, is a terrific example of how AFI gets more involved in financial inclusion, its connection to various SDGs. But do you have any advice for us as a community about what we're doing well or what we could do better?
Je pense que le lien, nous, on en est convaincus.
We are sure that the experience on the spot shows us this link, which is obvious between the financial inclusion and the implementation of certain SDGs, and the formal studies showed us that 8 or 9 SDGs which face an obstacle for the financial inclusion. And I think that I can come back to this notion of partnership, being a development partner in regards to the SDGs. We have to come back to the partnership. We have to work on the partnership, because this is something which can facilitate the ecosystem for the financial inclusion. I have been talking about AFI because we are at the Global Policy Forum. From our point of view, from the exterior, we're partners. We see AFI as a wonderful means to elaborate the political framework, to have great objectives, goals to boost this financial inclusion. That is something interesting at the level of this political framework. It's good to have all the members which share during these debates, and that in long term can reunite, make homogeneous different goals, which we can constate being a partner, that these goals work on the benefit of these SDGs, and that is something which is very good as itself. The second thing that AFI can bring is the implementation. We can state that these peer learning initiatives, these services of technical work, and sometimes very technical work on certain questions like financial inclusion and environment, climate change, gender, as we have talked about this today. These are topics which are not being limited by the politics, but we need to implement these politics of the financial inclusion in the member countries, and that is something that can be very interesting. And then the political framework and its implementation, I also think that AFI is participating in the harmonization of the results. That means that being public actor, not necessarily at the central bank, but at the AFI, we are being challenged by the impact we can have among the population and the beneficiary, which is very important for the government to have the results and to say to those which can say that the financial inclusion has no impact on the development politics and for the well-being of the population. And this partnership framework allows to have an impact on the harmonization on the politics and on the implementation of the politics and on the concrete measurable results, which allow to advance the objectives of the sustainable development and to help these populations.
Panelists have any sort of advice for AFI? What can the AFI network do, or advice for all of us as AFI, excuse me? Governor Dubois.
Non, puisque vous demandez,
As you have asked me, I will tell you I have at least 5 recommendations. First of all, I would like to congratulate AFI because I think that the management, the board of AFI is doing a great work. I would like to applaud you. And we represent I would like to give you 5 recommendations. The first one is that AFI continues to highlight the gender equality. We have done progress, but I think there's still a lot of progress to be made. The second one is to push the growth policy based on cultural reality of each country, because every country has its own particularities. Of course, we are trying to establish certain standards, but it's very important to take into consideration the culture of every country. And the AFI can help to elaborate a chart for the eco credit. We can talk about different objectives, different SDGs. And I would like the AFI to integrate the assurance system for the agricultural workers and the SMEs, which are the fundamental basis for the economic growth, and to improve the financial inclusion that in regards to the SDG. And finally, I would like the AFI to finance programs linked to the new technological IT programs for the agricultural use, because I think that agriculture is fundamentally important. We are talking about a new planet, and the technology can be extraordinary, and we are establishing a dialogue between the technology and the financial inclusion, and we can now start to talk about and think about the prosperity of these people which has just left poverty. And we can speak about financing of the programs which are for the use of the agriculture. We have already done a lot of things at AFI, but we can do still a lot of things. Thank you.
Some very creative ideas for AFI and for all of us as a network. Maybe time for maybe one or two short, quick questions on the SDGs and to our panelists. Does anyone have any questions? Shall we get back on track? I can't actually see anything. Okay, I don't see any hands, so we will thank you very much for your time. Sorry, wait, don't, Claude. There's someone's got a hand somewhere. There we go, a hand.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Musa Penda Piri from Bank of Zambia. It's really just a call on some of our cooperating partners. One of the things that AFI is good at is not just being a think tank, but a think and act tank. So we come up with policy guidelines which can be used by different regulators. So it's practical. My call really would be that when there are projects or initiatives being set up, we should also incorporate in our planning some form of pilot. So I'll give a practical example. If you have a $100,000 project and you use the entire $100,000 on technical support, you're not really impacting the community, in my opinion. And this is, I'm picking up from what Mr. Andreas said. It might be useful, for instance, to say we'll take $10,000 or $20,000 of this money and purchase, say, simple smartphones, $100 each. Buy 100 of them, train the community to learn to use the smart application, and then they can then pass on the message to others, and you have an exponential increase in people using DFS. Mm-hmm. Just talking about it will not solve the problem. Thank you.
Yeah. No, interesting idea, but the other thing that you're missing is there's going to be another at least $20,000, $30,000 to do the study to make sure that it worked, because just handing the you can hand out phones a great deal, but if you don't know there's any benefit to it, then it's going to be hard to justify doing that elsewhere.
Michael, do you still give me, Michael? It's me.
Oh, sorry, I thought I heard God talking. I didn't know. Yes.
Please give me still 2 minutes for recommendations to AFI.
Go ahead, please.
First of all, I really would like to tell all the staff of AFI and its wonderful director, keep what you are doing. First of all, it's important. Second, it needs continued attention And third, and that's the most important thing, it works. My second recommendation is keep your work for climate change. And my third recommendation, there's one issue where I think you should strengthen your involvement, and this is insurance. We had yesterday a very substantial workshop on insurance and the role insurance can play for the resilience of the population, low attendance, but very substantial contributions, and I think this could really play a major role. And I have a last recommendation to each of you. When you go home, tell your organization and tell each and everybody that in Kenya alone, 1 million people have been lifted out of poverty because of financial inclusion. I think a better boost for our issue cannot be conceived. And so take this message out, please.
Governor, terrific point. Governor Shawa.
Since Dr. Alfred is back here, again, just if I want to advise something, take the example of Palestine, what AFI and the local teams are doing. I think this is the most sophisticated country in the world, so the other countries, it's going to be much easier, but really what you guys have been doing so far, this is tremendous. Terrific. And my advice, continue when we're celebrating 10 years, I hope that AFI will remain for the rest of the life of our life, because at least you guys are bringing us all together to one important topic of today's generation, is financial inclusion. Thank you. And thank you for the donors, of course.
Excellent points to conclude on. Thank you, and join me with thanking the panelists.
Ladies and gentlemen, please also a round of applause for Michael for the very interactive session. Thank you so much, Michael, for that session. We'll excuse our panelists from the stage. And ladies and gentlemen, I know that we just have another 30 minutes or so for the final two sessions, which of course is the announcement of the 2018 Global Policy Forum outcomes and the closing ceremony of the 2018 Global Policy Forum. And following that, I have been advised that we'll still have afternoon tea there at the foyer, and we can probably all enjoy that right after the closing ceremony before we close off this year's forum. And I'm sure you don't mind. It'd be a great way to just do a final networking catch-up before we all go our separate ways, seeing as tonight we have a free evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'll move to our next portion of the agenda, which is the announcement of the 2018 Global Policy Forum outcomes. We had the launch of the Eastern Europe and Central Asia regional initiatives earlier on today. So we'll move to the announcement of the AFI Policy Model Framework. The AFI Membership Council met 2 days ago at the AFI AGM, ladies and gentlemen, unanimously approved AFI to issue policy models in a systematic process that follows through a framework that ensures the member-based policy models are generated, evaluated, endorsed, and finally approved by the Membership Council for adoption and subsequent voluntary adoption. AFI issuance of policy model is consistent with the approved Phase 3 strategy of AFI, that AFI shall provide guidance for devising financial inclusion policy and regulations. The network's vast practical experience in financial inclusion policy implementation will be used as a tool to develop practical policy guidance. This workstream does not intend to make AFI as a standard-setting body, rather complement the work of other international bodies with specific member-based policy guides that address specific needs. Ladies and gentlemen, please a round of applause with regards to the AFI Policy Model Framework. The Sochi Accord on FinTech for Financial Inclusion. The AFI Membership Council, at its AGM held 2 days ago, unanimously approved the Sochi Accord on FinTech for Financial Inclusion. This accord aims to provide members with guidance for devising policy solutions on use of inclusive, robust, and resilient technologies to address financial inclusion challenges. It also aims to provide members with capacity to address the challenges in the dynamic fintech field that is building regulatory pressure. The work stream will leverage on appropriate policies that advocate for technologies that enhance risk mitigation, improve supervision, and address demand-side issues on provision of responsible financial services. Ladies and gentlemen, please, another round of applause. Now we come to the announcement of the Maya commitments, and I know that there are a number of member countries who have made or renewed or made new commitments in this regard, and we have 17 to get through. So I do apologize that we can't allow all the member countries to come out and announce their various commitments. However, for this portion of the agenda, I will announce the institution. I ask that the head of delegation or the other delegates who are here representing that institution, please come up on stage. We have the commitments that will be shown up on the screen, and I also must mention here that all commitments will be uploaded on the AFI data portal that will be seen across the world. Once you're up on stage, that'll be viewed up on the screen, and then we'll applaud, of course, and wish you the very best on, of course, materializing that commitment, and then we'll ask you to, we'll invite the next institution. I apologize. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we acknowledge AFI members who have submitted updates and new commitments under the Maya Declaration Commitment Platform, a unique platform for policymakers and regulators across the world to make their commitments to address in-country financial inclusion challenges. Since the last GPF, the following countries have made new or renewed or updated commitments under the Maya Declaration. The member institutions are, ladies and gentlemen, Bank of Mozambique, Bank of Mozambique, thank you so much, sir. Please. Thank you so much. A round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, and all the very best. Bank Al Maghrib. All right, our next institution, Bank of Papua New Guinea. Here you are. Bank Al Maghrib, let's give them another round of applause, and we thank them sincerely for their renewing their commitments. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies. We move to our next institution, Bank of Papua New Guinea. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Our next institution is Bank of Tanzania. Congratulations, sir, and we wish you all the very best. BCEAO. Another round of applause, please. All right, thank you very much. I apologize. I've just been advised that we'd like you to remain on the stage, please, with me till the very end as we move through each of the institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, Central Bank of Congo. Another round of applause for the Central Bank of Congo. Central Bank of Egypt. Central Bank of Bahamas. A new member commitment, ladies and gentlemen. The Central Bank of Kenya. Retirement Benefits Authority of Kenya, a joint commitment. Central Bank of Suriname. Ministry of Finance, Madagascar. Financial Regulatory Authority of Mongolia. Ministry of Finance, Eswatini. Palestine Monetary Authority. Bank of Zambia. And ladies and gentlemen, the Bank of the Republic of Burundi. A final institution, IDRA, Bangladesh. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, we acknowledge AFI members who have submitted their updates and new commitments under the Maya Declaration Commitment Platform. We wish them all the very best with regards to the work in ensuring that they can meet these commitments. Let's give them all another round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you again to all the AFI member countries, and thank you to the various institutions up on stage. Let's give them another final round of applause before we move to the next part of our agenda. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. The final part of our agenda is the closing ceremony of the 2018 Global Policy Forum. I'd like to invite the head of the Central Bank in the Southern Region, a Bank of Russia, Mr. Evgeny Eberens, and also the Executive Director, the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, Dr. Alfred Hanig, to please come up on stage. Your Excellencies and Honorable Governors, distinguished delegates, to begin our closing ceremony for the 2018 GPF, I draw your attention to the screens for a final look behind the scenes of the preparations. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, I now invite the head of the Central Bank in the Southern Region, Bank of Russia, to deliver his closing address. Please warmly welcome Mr. Evgeny Eberens.
Dear friends, we've come to an end of the 5 great days that have given us the opportunity to discuss the most important and promising issues connected to the financial inclusion for population and entrepreneurs. To my mind, when we talk about the financial services affordability and accessibility, we're talking about a very large group of people that are concerned. In fact, hundreds of millions of our planet population that are directly connected to the decisions or events that happen within AFI, especially certainly taken in Sochi. In Russia, we have belief that everything that happens in Krasnodar region has to be successful. I wish that all the decisions that were made here, all the discussions, ideas that have taken place here are successful, because everything that is related to the activity that unites AFI, I think it can be prospective and promising not only for AFI but similar organizations, but as a whole, to build cross-border cooperation between our states. And of course, we are grateful to AFI for choosing Krasnodar region and Sochi as a place for such an event. Please believe us, we really wanted you to feel the Russian hospitality, to feel at home. And I would like you to introduce the people that try to make this event successful and efficient in terms of organization. I would like to thank, first of all, the team of the Bank of Russia. Please come up on the stage. Colleagues, please, a round of applause. Please welcome on stage representative from the Perfectum company, technical operator of this event. Please welcome on stage. Also welcome on stage direction of the main media center where we are now, and that welcomed us for our forum. The head of a catering company that made our presence here tasteful and cozy. And of course, all the volunteers, all the young people that greeted us with smiles and helped us in all simple and complex questions. Let's thank them also. And by the way, 2018 in Russia is the year of volunteers. So you see, this is the growing movement that really helps in our life. Thank you. And special thanks to our interpreters, the special kind of profession that I think really unites people. I hope you felt it during all the discussions that happened, and as a whole during all the events that happened during our forum. Thank you very much, dear interpreters. And of course, I would like to thank everyone who continues to work with us, all the technicians, cameramen, photographers, who will let us not only keep in our memory the best moments of our forum, but also to have them in digital. With all this, we are quite sorry to state that our forum is coming to an end, but with all this, we tell you, our guests that have come here, great thank you. Thank you very much to everybody who came up on stage, who prepared this event. We are thanking you. The forum is coming on to an end, but we are not saying goodbye. We are saying see you later. See you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I invite Dr. Alfred Hanig to deliver his closing remarks, many have been inspired by the Maya Declaration commitments, and many continue to be. And I have to announce now that also updating their Maya commitment, we must acknowledge Bank of Uganda. Can we please give them a round of applause? And also the Central Bank of Paraguay. Can we give them also a round of applause? We thank all these institutions for their ongoing commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, the Executive Director, Alliance for Financial Inclusion, Dr. Alfred Hanig.
Yeah, here we are. This is the last speech for this year, at least at the GPF. And I must say, please don't be too amused, but my glasses didn't make it, but I'm still using them, so yeah, I'm sorry for that. I just lost the screw somewhere there. But of course, without the proper glasses, you can't find the screw, so what can you do? So, but I will make it. I will make it. That's okay. Now, yeah, we are almost at the end, and as Yevgeny has said, yeah, there's a feeling of sadness, no? When it's coming to an end. But there is, of course, also a feeling of joy, because we have achieved a lot. And there's also a feeling of excitement, because we are going to another place, which we will be all aware of very soon. Will be soon revealed. Now, I would first of all like to just share with you a few numbers, because they're always interesting, and we didn't give them to you before. So very quickly, 596 participants were here. We had, out of which were 426 member participants, countries represented 96, AFI member institutions 84. Overall male participants 351, female 245, so that means 59% male, 41% female. We had from AFI members 245 male and 181 female. So that means we had male 57.5% and female 43.5%. So in terms of gender, we had slightly more from AFI members than from the rest of the crowd. That's actually not so bad, but perhaps just a very small trend. But I wanted just to mention this. So these were the numbers. Now to the outcomes. I think we have heard the Sochi Accord on FinTech for Financial Inclusion, which got launched at this event. I think it's a very important framework, as we said earlier, that will help to guide us in our work towards making use of fintech in a way that we can also manage the challenges, the risks of technology and so forth. We have also seen the launch of the AFI policy model framework, which will enable us now, according to the mandate that has been given last year, to issue guidance through the AFI model to our members who are in need of such guidance. We've also seen the launch of the Eastern Europe, Central Asia Regional Initiative, in short ECAPI, that I think is going to move forward with the first meeting already before the end of this year. Now, I think this would have to be updated. We have not seen 14, but I understand 16 or even 17, including insurance regulator from Bangladesh. Member institutions submitted new and renewed and updated Maya commitments. We got very, very positive reactions from many of the private sector partners, but also from others on the new financial inclusion and climate change work stream. And I think this is also important, we saw a strong will and interest to continue on the implementation of the Denarau Action Plan. I think we have also committed ourselves with all this work, not to work only on the gender gap and all the other issues that we have discussed, but also to work on the usage and the quality gap that we are still observing in many of the jurisdictions represented here in AFI. Now, I have to also thank the working groups, and I'm saying this because I also want to read to you the names of the newly appointed chairs and co-chairs of the working groups. Now, on the working group for CEMEC, which is Consumer Empowerment and Market Conduct, the new chair or co-chair is Ms. Rochelle Thomas from Central Bank of the Philippines. Co-chair is Marie-José Ndaya Ilunga from Central Bank of Congo. For DFS, we keep Mrs. Clarissa Kudovor, Bank of Ghana, as chair. Then we have Carla Fernandez from Banco de Mozambique. And Mr. Asisula Sikandri from the Afghanistan Bank as a co-chair. For the FID working group, we have Mr. Peter Olianka Adiemi, Central Bank of Nigeria, as chair. Mrs. Marwa A. El Husari, Central Bank of Egypt, as co-chair. And Alex Ochan, Bank of Uganda, also as a co-chair. And then we have on the Global Standards Proportionality Working Group, Mr. Ramizul Islam from Bangladesh Bank as chair. And Mr. Masiwala Farouk from the Afghanistan Bank as co-chair. Thank you. Great. Now let's just talk a little bit about the forum, and I think we have received quite a lot of feedback. I mean, when I walk around, quite many of you talk about what they see here. So if I want to summarize this, it would be basically too complex and would take too long, but what I have heard and what I heard actually quite often is about the composition of the topics of the work that we have been doing here, the composition of the work items, what we have put in all the sessions. I think we got a very good feedback from you on the themes that went under the innovation inclusion impact headline of this GPF. We also got good feedback on the topics in terms of the quality of the discussions that we have had, and I think there was also quite this time in the GPF, I think we had a very good level of sophistication of the conference organization. I think it was very balanced and definitely in line with what this organization wants to stand for. We had, I think, plenty of time to connect, and this, I think, is always for us a challenge every year to compose a program that also allows for the networking. But I think there was enough time and, of course, apparently enough space to do that. And but I mean, what can you say? No, Russia is a big country, so we have of course a lot of space, and I think we made use of it. My colleague actually, Paula, she has an app on her phone, so she measured how much we walk per day. Can you just give one? How many? 9K, so 9K per day. No, that's actually, so those of you who are still not happy with that can move on to the gym, but 9K is actually not so bad, no? So what I also would like to mention are the important recommendations that we got. No, I think Governor from Haiti, Mr. Brock, others, Leo and also the others on that panel, I think, gave us very, very good recommendations. I think it was Governor from Palestine with us. So we take this very seriously into account, and of course, we try to reflect this in our work programs. I think we all have also heard a very frank dialogue. I mean, I was personally quite amazed that we talk very openly, for example, about issues of gender gap in financial inclusion in countries which oftentimes perhaps have social norms in place which can be a barrier, and we talk openly in this forum. I think this is very useful and of course can help us in our work because we can actually focus on the right issues. I think we see in this forum, and this is maybe a challenge for us in AFI, we see an increasing diversity of participation, especially from the member side, which is a good thing. And of course it reflects also the broad range of profiles in terms of financial inclusion, challenges and solutions that we see around the world. Now, I think this will also lead to an increasing number of members. We have been approached by quite a number of potential members who would like to join us and or at least work with us, and those ones are not always those ones who have been, or the type or the group of countries that has been with us at the first GPF in Kenya. It's going to look different and it's going to be more diverse, and I think this is a good thing for AFI. I would also really want, before I of course want to express special thanks to Assembly of Russia, but let me say the organization was indeed outstanding. I mean, what we saw here, there was, there are not many words that I can find actually to classify what we have seen here. The gala dinner yesterday was amazing. Not only that, I finally managed to be honored as a Russian Cossack, but also I think the whole event was just too good, and I really liked it. Now, I think this has been a very professional forum. That also, I think, reflects what we mean when we talk about a truly global policy leadership alliance. I think this is clearly reflected in the way this forum was conducted. And what I want to mention is, of course, the incredible spirit that I have, again, seen many happy faces, and maybe a few things, as always, where some of us are maybe less happy or sometimes a little bit tense, stressed, under pressure. But on the other hand, the 98% of things went so well and was really accompanied by this incredible spirit. I think that's also very great. So, what stays with us as an impression from this GPF, apart from the things that I have mentioned? And if you ask me how I would coin it, for me, Evgeny, this is, for me, the 10th GPF, the GPF of friendship. The GPF of friendship. I think that's what we are going to take home. So thank you for that. To our host, let members speak. No? I mean, I heard one sentence very often, and this is a sentence that kind of kept sticking in my ear. The sentence is a very simple one. Wow, the Russians have done a great job. I heard it very often. Oh, the Russians have done a great job. So I want to say that you have indeed done a wonderful job with this GPF. You have given it, as our members always do, you have given it a very special flavor. You have given it to us in a way that we were able to get closer to your culture, to your values, to your country. I think that was outstanding, and I must say this is a quality of a host that, of course, will again, as usual, make it also quite demanding for the next host. But the next host will do it, I'm sure, will do it. But we thank you for what you have done. All the organization and the people that came here, I think, already introduced themselves so that you could see who helped you all the time. So I, again, would also like to thank, of course, the vendor, Perfectum. It seems that this name is maybe their program, right? It was pretty perfect what we saw. And also, you mentioned translators, the caterers, the drivers, the volunteers, the cleaners. Not to forget maybe all the people behind the scene who we actually don't see here, but they do also a very important job. And yeah, well, he has left, but I think we also had a good moderation here. Many of the moderators did a great job, but of course, the last moderation is also kind of sticking, provided by Michael Opera Tarazi. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, I would like to thank our MC. She is sitting here. Please. So, Michelle, you have done a great job, and those of you who have come to Fiji will remember, and maybe you know why we brought her again, because we were so, why are you sneaking? No, it's not, it doesn't work like that. No. Michelle, thank you so much for all what you have done. Yeah, and of course, it's my pleasure to also thank It's my pleasure to thank the AFI staff, the people that have come here. Most of them are sitting in the corner, but they can also start moving in this direction, please. Yeah, someone has to start. What about you, Kennedy? Please, just AFI staff, please. including Norbert. Yeah. Please. So, and while the team is moving up, I should also say that maybe, and you know that, but I want to emphasize it. These people have been working for this for 1 year, and of course the work continues even after we closed this session. So I think this was wonderful, and I can't mention each and every one, but I definitely would like to thank the person who has been so many, my goodness. Wow, that's really great. Yeah. Yes, please. So, and I would definitely like, at least from all my colleagues, like to mention that I'm very grateful for the very able leadership and organization of Deputy Executive Director Norbert Mumba, who has led this team. And the head of our task team, Iliki Boletava, who is doing all this. And Monica? Yeah, Monica. Yeah, thank you. Monica from the comms. She's actually leading our comms, and she's responsible for the wonderful appearance of what you have seen here in Sochi, including the branding. Thanks so much, Monica. Now, let me then almost close. Almost close by saying once again, thank you so much for coming, all members, all partners. Thank you for traveling, and we hope you had a good time. We hope you learned a lot. We hope you made the connections you wanted. We hope you got inspired. And of course, we hope to see you again. And where we are going to see you, we will reveal it now. Thank you so much, and see you next year.
Welcome to Rwanda, the land of 1,000 hills. Inclusive growth has become an important topic for all policymakers. And you can't talk of inclusive growth without talking of financial inclusion. As we all look forward to promote financial inclusion in our respective communities, I hope that this forum will be successful in bringing together diverse ideas on how we can do this better as a global community. To all of you looking to travel to Rwanda, it is our pleasure to have you. See you in Kigali in 2019.
Uzazurere
Well, ladies and gentlemen, a historic occasion. So many exciting things. We just concluded with many exciting announcements, and then now again, something more to look forward to come 2019. However, like we started our the 2018 AFI Global Policy Forum with the gong, we return to that to officially close our ceremony. So as per tradition, I'll kindly invite, of course, Mr. Eberens, who will have to hit the gong 3 times and then hand over the gavel, of course, to the host for 2019. I kindly request all our guests here on stage to take their seats. Please, for the final portion to conclude our formalities for the closing ceremony, please be seated. And I invite the Deputy Governor from Rwanda to please come forward. I know you'd like to say a few words with encouraging all the delegates here to represent, who will be coming for 2019.
Thank you so much. We've longed for this song since I don't know how many years. And finally, we got it. We are so happy. Like our governor, a he for she governor, has said, we are looking forward to welcoming you all to Kigali, a land of 1,000 hills, but also 1,000 smiles. We are going to seriously discuss financial inclusion, take serious action, and then relax seriously. So make your stay memorable. Please. See you next year. I don't know the dates, but we can't really wait. Thank you so much.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another round of applause and congratulations once again to Rwanda, who will be hosting next year's AFI Global Policy Forum. With that, we conclude our closing program. We thank you sincerely for your attention. We hope you've enjoyed these 2 days. A final networking catch-up for all of us before we depart. We invite you for refreshments outside. Have a blessed journey back home. Thank you very much.